A while ago, I made a video on why Ireland is often hypocritical on Palestine. And in the video, I talked about the Occupied Territories Bill, which, for those who don't know, would ban trade with the illegal settlements in occupied Palestine. Occupied Palestine being the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem. Despite the bill being nearly 10 years old now, it was never actually signed into law, even though it was passed in the Dáil before. Now, that's because of pressure from our friends over in the United States, and I don't mean friends in a nice way. We were directly threatened by the Senate. They sent a letter to the Dáil saying basically, don't fuck with our friend Israel. And even the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, attacked us on X over it and said some racist shit about Irish people, of course. And yeah, in the video, basically, I argued that because our economy is so reliant on the United States, that the government wasn't going to act against them for fear of any sort of retaliation. This put the Irish government in a tricky position because boycotting Israel is quite popular in Ireland and has become even more popular since 2023. And so they think they found a way around the issue. Occupied Territories Bill signed into law by President Catherine Connolly. The long-awaited bill banning goods from Israeli settlements in the occupied territories in Palestine has been signed into law. Despite ongoing criticism, it does not include a ban on services. President Connolly signed the Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian Territory Bill 2026 into law this afternoon. Israel has occupied the West Bank since 1967. More than 500,000 Israeli settlers live in the territory, excluding the annexed East Jerusalem, among some 3 million Palestinians, which is illegal under international law. The now law is the government's version of independent senators Francis Black's original Occupied Territories Bill, which she first drew up almost a decade ago in 2018. That original bill included calls for both a ban on goods and services from the occupied territories, as, its supporters argued, it would be ineffective unless it included both areas. However, despite an Oireachtas Foreign Affairs Committee last year recommending both should be included in the coalition's subsequently drawn up bill, government has said its legal advice is that this would present too big an appeal risk. What the Irish government have done is basically watered down the bill to the point where it becomes more symbolic than impactful than real. And that's because most of our trade with Israel in those occupied territories are done under services, it's not goods. And this comes at a time when the Irish government is actually pushing for a complete ban on goods and services uh, for trade between the EU and Israel. So, right now in Brussels, we're arguing to ban it all, while the same government is passing it purely on goods in Ireland. They've watered it down because they're scared of the impact that an US retaliation would have. And the US have threatened like specifics on that. You can watch my other video if you're interested in that. On top of it being hypocritical, this also means that Ireland is failing to comply with its obligations under international law. According to the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, they said of the bill, the passage of this legislation is an important acknowledgement that Ireland has obligations not to contribute to the maintenance of unlawful situations under international law. However, by excluding services, the legislation falls far short of what international law requires and of what the government itself has been advised. To be clear, the distinction between goods and services has no basis in international law. Ireland's obligation is to ensure that it does not provide aid or assistance that contributes to the maintenance of Israel's unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory. That obligation extends to economic activity more broadly, including services. I have two main takeaways from this situation, and the first is that so long as we are so economically dependent on the United States, they will retain control over our political processes. And that's not to say like they'll have direct control from DC or anything like that. But it's more that whoever pays your bills owns you. And we're reliant on US multinationals to fund pretty much everything in this country. Three US multinationals make up a majority of our tax income from foreign direct investment, from foreign businesses in Ireland. So long as that remains the case, so long as Ireland remains essentially an economic extension of the United States, they will have influence over us, especially surrounding issues that they're sensitive about, which is the biggest currently is Israel. Okay. That's a result of Irish economic planning, by the way. Like the US didn't trick us into like becoming like this or anything. For the last 30 years, we've begged foreign direct investments to come to Ireland, mostly from the United States, but from elsewhere as well. And this is the result. We lose a certain level of political autonomy. The solution is to diversify our economy away from the United States, but that's way easier said than done, and it would take years and years and years of slow changes. My second takeaway is that Ireland is willing to push for a total trade embargo on Israel if it's done through the EU. Because if we're the only one who does it, right, all of America's attention will be on us. Whereas if we do it as a block, the hit is going to be more spread out. In other words, like we're going to go with the herd. We're not going to be like the sole sheep that leads the way or anything like that. The shepherd that leads the way, I suppose. So what the Irish government has essentially done here is pass a watered down version of the bill so that they're able to say to their domestic audience, see, we've done something, while also saying to the United States, hey, we didn't do that much. Please leave us alone. And so if you hear Micheál Martin or anyone hyping up the fact that they passed this, remind yourself it's mostly for looks.